Very much, Riv. This time we are joined by just ourselves because I just like your company so much. I don't want to share you.
Yeah, we can break down this game a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So start with picks and bans then. Kind of interesting setup. So basically, first pick Lulu for LMQ, a champion. No one's really surprised to get first pick there for the top lane. Also, Nami Lucian getting picked early on for TSM. And ultimately, LMQ comes out with a pretty Yasuo-based comp. Right? You've got 3 people who can help Yasuo get knockups: Thresh, Tristana, and the top lane Lulu as well.
Yeah, and it was actually a really long time into the game before they were able to get that. But as far as picks and bans just go, it's a little bit funny how when the Lulu was first picked, especially with 2 jungle bans, no one prioritized the Evelynn, really. LMQ ended up sneaking that on the backside, and it's not like Amazing's had big-time performances on Jarvan yet. He did a little bit better this game, but it still looked a little bit lackluster overall.
It's weird because the champions picked here, like the top lane mages that are grabbed, the new Gragas and Lulu, they're not the same level of threat as people like Yasuo, Tristana, Lucian, Kayle. Like, they're kind of both 2.5 threat teams is the weird thing, where you can really just say if you kill the 2 backline squishies, which is Bjergsen Wild Turtle or Xiao and Vasily, you kind of remove the damage output there. It's not old Gragas, and Lulu never had that kind of burst damage. And so you were back to these sort of 2 threat teams where like the tanks dive in, you're like, okay, but where's the follow-up? And oftentimes there wasn't much.
Yeah, not to mention the really mobile composition that LMQ had, which made Shockwaves very difficult to land for Bjergsen. But even with all that, TSM had a pretty good advantage early. And we're going to show a few clips about how they got there.
Yeah, so we can pull up the first replay we have, actually. One of a couple of clips here. This is one of the mid lane fights. Actually, this might be one that
This was the turnaround, actually. So this is the moment where TSM had a pretty big lead, but then the initiation goes really wrong, combined with the fact that this is the first time LMQ got the initiation we wanted. I mean, we had that whole pregame about Xiao actually aggressing up against Bjergsen. This was the first time we really got to see the impacts of it.
All right, so you come in on this fight, and really amazing over dives, and he's tanky, and as you talked about, TSM being ahead.
We can roll this clip.
Yeah, we can go ahead and roll it right here, but TSM, they still feel like they're ahead. They feel like there's enough follow. They've got some burst there, but the problem is, like, this is like great dodging by Xiao. It gets around from everything. The wind wall separates it, and they're able to reach, like, finally, the flash jump in, the knockup from Lulu. They finally reach the back line, and there's no damage left afterwards.
And it was a very missed ultimate by Darius as well, which ended up allowing LMQ to really jump on. If it wasn't for the spectacular play of Turtle right here, it would have been a complete landslide. He just dodged out so many spells and ended up making this a delayed 3-for-2 instead of what should have basically been a 3-for-0.
Yeah, and honestly, you know, Wild Turtle did a very great job early in mid-game there. And of course, his individual plays have all been awesome, and he did one of the standard Lucian builds of Ruin King Youmu's, and that's fine. He itemized weird afterwards. I think we'll get to that point later, because we're still going to talk about the team comps for a bit, but we will touch on TSM's item choices later on, because those got suspect.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about this game is how you and I were talking about it. It was very swingy in multiple directions, because we just had a whole bunch of glass cannons in this game. Every item the Turtle built until he sold his Youmu's for a Randwins was offensive. So we saw him blowing up Ackerman in about half a second. But then, if he makes one small mistake, he gets 2-shot or 1-shot. By Vasily or Xiao. So really created a place, even though LMQ had a much stronger late game composition, because everyone was so glass cannon, it made it so TSM would have small opportunities to turn.
Sure, if you make any individual misplay, if you miss your wind wall, if you don't land the hook, you don't lantern out, Shockwave means you die. And it's one of the tricky things when you can kind of pair the champions as well, where you've got Xiao on Yasuo, who has to be so particular about the fights he goes for. And I know we talked about the fact that LMQ weren't finding their way in a lot of times. Like, you can flash in with Evelynn, hit a Lulu ulti, and just go in. Like, you can just choose to start a fight, and you're going to get somebody with that almost for sure. You can Tristan ult the Jarvan, and you can jump off that. The fact that LMQ didn't go in was, 1, good play by TSM, and 2, not just going in for no reason. Right? Xiao is an incredibly smart player, an incredibly good one overall, and the fact that he's like, I'm going to wait till we find the right targets, play defensively, wind wall some of the sieges, hope we find our way in. A little bit like Complexity's win over C9, where they would wait for the right targets in a lot of these cases, right? Once they hit the backline, they'd go in. And just being able to temper that aggression until the right time was, I think, a very good mark for them. And then they did find the right targets, right? You saw them catch up Bjergsen or catch up Wild Turtle, and then you saw how explosive it was when they could hit the right targets.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have another clip as well.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, we pull up our second replay. This is another one of the great fights for LMQ. I think this one might be them getting Turtle. I forget if exactly what happened.
Yeah, this was an incredibly close fight. This was basically where No Name came in from the back flank, and for a moment it looked like TSM was going to be turning this. We could actually roll this clip a little slowly as the initiation happens. Notice how Bjergsen got his Zhonya's before Xiao came in, so he was effectively safe in here. And this is actually an opportunity for TSM to turn the game around. Wild Turtle just missed out half an auto attack on a No Name, and there were so many people in this fight that if a few minuscule things went better for Wild Turtle, it would have been okay. He missed by one auto attack on 2 separate kills, which allowed LMQ to close in on that one and gain even more of a stronghold.
Yeah.
With the swinginess of these fights, so much could have happened in this game with TSM plays a little bit crisper in a few spots, and they actually are the ones winning this game because the gold was at a point where it was seemingly like the Lucian and the Orianna against the
Yasuo
Trist, exactly, because Gragas and Lulu actually ended up being somewhat supportive. I never saw those great ultimates by Gragas.
No, not really. You never saw the real big setups there.
So much of it was because of the incredible mobility of the LMQ composition. We talked about it a little bit. They had the flank ability in their team comp because the only way they want to play this is with Eve coming back from behind. Yasuo flies in by himself. Trist is spaced as well. Thresh is somewhere on the side.
Yeah.
No way when they're doing their optimal team fight are they in place for a multi-man shockwave.
Yeah, none of the two threats are ever going to be in the same place. Like, they're just going to make sure that never happens. That's good on by LMQ. I do want to follow up. You were talking about if little things went better. I want to get to the TSM itemization point. Because Bjergsen was at 4 items, still no Void Staff. Wild Turtle was at 4 items. Like, he bought Trinity Force 4th item. And to be honest, Trinity Force is a good 2nd item. It is a power spike item to say, like, I have BT Triforce or Ruin King Triforce, and the base damage is high enough because the proc damage barely scales at that point that you can bully people out because your 2 items are better than their 2 items. Like, you will spike above, like, Eye-Edge Zeal will be inferior to, like, Ruin King Yomu's or to, like, Bloodthirster Triforce. But once you've got Infinity Edge and Yomu's Ghostblade and things like that, like, buy a Phantom Dancer, buy a Last Whisper, get 60% crit chance, get a bunch of armor pen, and then destroy people. And so you saw in the team fight that we saw a second ago, right? Wild Turtle gets guys to like 1/3 health, and it's like, man, if you had crit one more time, he was dead. And time and again, he's missing that just barely. And that's when you make a mistake in itemization, that's what happens. Now, these players are very good, but they're new to the patch, and not everyone spends 7 hours doing math like I do. And so not everyone's going to know right away, like, hey, don't build late Triforce, because the value of crit when you have IE is so high, buying a 3,700 gold item with 10% crit is a waste of money.
Yeah, it definitely felt a little bit like they got trapped into their item builds. They wanted the Morel and Omicron with the cheers, so he finished that, and then he got his Death Cap before his Voice Staff. They had difficult trade-offs in the AP spectrum as well. But for LMQ, you know, with that victory, they have tough schedule next week as well. They face CLG and I believe Cloud9. I'll have to double check on that. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they move into next week.
Yeah, we'll see if they can do it, of course. And it's a 4-game week next week as well, so a lot of prep required for everybody. Now, guys, we're going to take a quick break while the teams load in for our next battle, which is Counter Logic Gaming versus Dignitas. So don't touch that mouse. We'll be right back.